Welcome to the K-Zoom Podcast. Today, we are talking about discovering your unique story. We talked about storytelling before, but now we're going to talk about how to really find that for yourself. So let's jump in. Catchy intro. Jordan, you made an awesome intro, and I'm sure the music you selected was just groovy.
Bang it.
And here we are. So, Kaya, last time we were talking about story, we were talking about different brands and how they invite us to connect to a story. But I think sometimes when we begin talking about story, it can just feel sort of forced. Where it's just like, well, I have to talk about story, so we have to talk about narrative, and it gets really buzzwordy really, really fast, and you can kind of lose the authenticity. So today I want to propose that we talk about how everyone actually has a unique story that can be told, even, I would suggest, in the same sector. That even competitors, there's space for everybody's story at the table. The key is figuring out how to find that unique story. What do you think about this idea?
I definitely agree. I mean, humans are unique in general. Everybody's different. Everybody's life is different. And the story of you, the story of your business is always going to be unique to you. It really just mostly depends on, I think, what your focus is. So when you find your focus, then you can wrap the story around that. And everybody's focus is unique and different as well.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's important to start with, why do you do what you do? Right? A lot of companies know what they do, even how they do it, but sometimes the why something is actually being done can be lost. And I think that's an important starting point for every company if they're going to tell their story, if they're going to endeavor to present who they really are, to connect with new customers, clients, maybe even their current ones, and bring them along in their story, then they need to really understand what that actually is and have it dialed in a unique way.
One of the first things you learn in business school, especially in marketing, is when you start a business, the first thing that they have you do is do your mission and your values, which really broken down to is who are you, why are you, and what are you going to do about it, basically. Yeah. And when we're talking about finding your story, finding who you are, that's like the core of where you start out at. Yeah. And once you have a good core and a good mission, good vision, good values, then you can kind of connect with your audience after that. Because if they match your vision, your mission, and your values, that's who you're talking to. That's how you find your target audience. So really, it's the very beginning steps is finding your story to building a business. So if you have a business out there and you don't know what your story is, that's a big missing chunk of finding your target audience, finding who you are, and even really partaking in business.
Yeah, and I think one of the temptations is I think this happens to everybody, whether you're a business or an individual, to see somebody else's story that's working and feel like you need to be that story, to live somebody else's story. But I think we all know, probably going back to elementary school, that it doesn't really work. But it's so hard to figure out who we are and how do you embrace that and what do we own. But when you can figure out what that is and how to own your own story, to understand who you are and why you are and what you're going to do about it. I love those questions. Yeah. Then you're able to really step in and own the space that you're in. And last time we talked about places like companies like Subaru and Apple and Nike. I think they understand who they are, and when you're true to yourself, you're able to lead your business in that true space as well and invite others to be a part of that, as you said.
So when you're discovering your unique story, what would you say is, at the very basic, what do you think would be the first step in figuring out who they are?
Yeah, I think when it comes down to it, even individually, but I think especially as a business, is what problem are you solving? And I don't think that's necessarily the product or the service you're offering. I think that can be a vehicle for that, but I think a lot of times it actually is a means to an end. And sometimes I think they're lined up, right? There's a desire to, okay, we want to make the best whatever because they're solving some problem, but usually there's even an underlying why behind that. I think of a company that we worked with here recently, and on the surface they are a paper products and fiber conversion facility. And you go in there and you see it, and they do it really well, and they work with top brands, top companies, and they're a pretty successful business. But when we sat down and interviewed them, why they're doing what they're doing wasn't to make really good paper products is because they wanted to impact people. And that was just the means that through the generations of running this company, they've realized, oh, we are now positioned to care for our employees, to care for our community. And this is what allows us to do that. And it overflows into great products as well.
Yeah.
And that stood out to me as something that was unique. Even the CEO said, we make great paper products, and you might use some of them, but really we care about people. And I think that's something that if I were in that industry and I was working with them, that's something I would want to be a part of too, because ultimately it is about people helping people. I think he says that verbatim in the video. It was inspiring to me because as I sat there and interviewed the company, it wasn't just the top executives saying this. It was the people who had been there for a month sharing stories of how they were impacted by them doing this and them actually living out what they cared about. They lived out their mission, vision, and values.
Yeah.
And they didn't have to tell you otherwise, where there are other times you see people who they use the buzzwords, they use the words like narrative and story and meaning, but they're telling you, they're not showing you.
I think too, because as you're talking about how it's more about the people, it was really about this mission more than sometimes it is about just the products themselves. I think that's what really keeps the fire going in a business. That's what makes the businesses last in for the long time. That's what makes the employees have that lifetime long employee status, is because they can get tired of the products. You know, they're making the same thing every day. They can get tired of what you're selling. But if your mission is there, that's what they're really passionate about. That's where you get that passion to come in.
And I think it's okay too if it is about your product. If you want to make a product that just is a really, really excellent product. Maybe it's I'm not going to try to guess what your product might be, but it's just own your position, own where you're at, and don't be ashamed of it. And it's okay too if you're in a space where you're like, we want to do this, we think we know what we do, but to go through the process of discovering why you're doing what you're doing. And that's reflected in your hows and your whats, because then you're able to move forward with greater confidence, rather than sort of like, well, I think we're sort of this, I think we're sort of this, and where there are those gaps, the consumer kind of fills in and guesses. Your own team might fill in and guess, and your marketing team might have no idea what to actually sell, what to actually talk about, and so it's
nothing is harder than being a marketer for a business that has no idea who they are. So.
Yeah, right. And so it's important to figure out who you are. And it's okay if you're years down the road in this journey. It's okay if you start to just stop and be like, okay, why are we doing what we're doing? And to look back on your story and say, as a company, and say, okay, what are the obstacles we've overcome? What are the decisions we've made? And that will begin and understand, why did we make those decisions? And that will begin to reveal what you actually care about. It'll reveal why you're doing what you're doing. And maybe you love it, and maybe you need to adjust and double down on what you actually care about. That's the beginning part of discovering your unique story is, why do you do what you do? What is the problem you're solving or the obstacle you're trying to overcome? And owning that and figuring out how to step into that and letting that affect every part of your business as well. And if you are looking to be part of telling that story, whether it be on social media or through blogs or through video or photography, you can always give KZoom a shout. We'd love to work with you. We'd love to help you even go through the process of discovering your story, having that conversation of, why do you do what you do? Let's talk about this, and we can get more in depth with you there. But that's all I got, Kai. Thanks for chatting today a little bit more about story and how to do this uniquely.
Yeah, very uniquely.
Unique New York.
New League. Well, thanks for watching the KZoom podcast. Once again, we appreciate you all. Thank you, Mike, for joining me.
Yeah, thank you for joining me. And we'll see you next time.
See you next time.